So just over a year ago on January 5th, 2023, the 10:45 a.m. train to Grand Central was the first ever train to Grand Central Madison. That train arrived at the terminal 20 minutes later, just after 11 a.m. And that moment changed the railroad forever. But now that a year has passed, you don't really see the same excitement and fanfare that you used to. But over the last year, after integrating this terminal into my life, I've learned a lot about this place, and I think it's time for me to take another look. So let's start off by talking about the terminal's history. The story begins in the 1960s with President John F. Kennedy wanting to propose a bill for funding mass transit. Unfortunately, he didn't live long enough to get the bill passed. However, President Lyndon B. Johnson in 1964 passed the Urban Mass Transportation Act. This ultimately provided funding for the MTA to study new projects for system-wide expansion. Some of these projects included an extension of the Long Island Railroad to Lower Manhattan, a direct connection between JFK and Jamaica Station, the 2nd Avenue Subway, and the East Side Access Project. Once the plans for the new tunnel were finalized at 63rd Street, it was a double-stacked 4-track tunnel, making it the only 4-track tunnel in the East River. And while Amtrak does have 4 tracks going through the East River tubes, they are 2 pairs of 2 tracks, unlike the 63rd Street tunnel. But oddly enough, the East Side Access Project is actually related to the 2nd Avenue Subway, as the 63rd Street tunnel was a prerequisite to connect trains from the 2nd Avenue Subway to the rest of the subway. But in 1975, the city almost went bankrupt, and as a result, the project was cancelled. But because the 63rd Street tunnel was already under construction at the time, the tunnel needed to be completed in order for it to be structurally secure. As a result, the 4-track double-stack tunnel was completed, with the lower level of the tunnel ultimately going unused for many years. However, new life was added back into the project through the Rebuild and Renew New York Transportation Bond Act of 2005. One of the main reasons this project was reintroduced was to make the New York rail system more resilient. This included funding many other projects all throughout Long Island to increase capacity and the ability for the Long Island Railroad to handle service disruptions and changes that may be necessary in the event that certain tracks or tunnels were no longer accessible due to repairs or anything else happening to them. Some of the ancillary projects completed for East Side Access were Ronkonkoma 2nd Track, the Main Line 3rd Track, Jamaica Shuttle Platforms, Herald Interlocking, and the High Bridge Yard on the Metro North. We'll get back to that one later. But with over a decade of construction later and all the teething issues finally sorted out, it was finally announced that on January 25th, 2023, the first train would run from Jamaica to Grand Central Madison at 10:45 a.m. and the public got to experience the terminal for the first time. The terminal itself is very unique for New York, implementing many new design elements that we've never seen before, as well as carrying some design elements from subway projects like the 2nd Avenue Subway and Hudson Yards, introducing them to Long Island Railroad passengers for the first time. Starting from the bottom of the station, there are a total of 8 different tracks that your train can depart or arrive from. It's split into 2 different caverns, each hosting 4 tracks, 2 above and 2 below. To keep in line with Grand Central proper's naming scheme for tracks, these tracks are labeled as 200 for upper level trains and 300 for lower level trains. This is due to the fact that tracks at Grand Central Madison sit below the tracks for Grand Central Terminal. But what really sets apart Grand Central Madison from a lot of other terminals and stations throughout the city is the fact that the mezzanine is located on the middle level. That means passengers who are boarding or exiting from the 200 level tracks have to go down and then up. While at first it might sound odd, the actuality is that it's actually pretty ingenious due to the fact that with double stack stations, passengers from the lower level have to traverse through the upper level to get out of the station. This causes a lot more crowding on the upper level. By having passengers exit through a shared mezzanine in the middle, it prevents passengers from the lower level from having to go to the upper level in order to exit. In general, the terminal was designed with a lot of space in mind to ensure that there's enough capacity for the future. The complex is so huge that it actually spans the distance between two subway stations. The platforms themselves are over 1,000 feet long, and that's nearly double the length of some New York City subway trains. The platform itself spans between 45th Street and 48th Street. The complex itself, however, spans between 43rd Street and as far as 52nd Street in some non-public areas. And while most people associate Grand Central with 42nd Street, the truth is, this new terminal is as close to Rockefeller Center as it is to places like Bryant Park. But getting out of the station to those destinations is no easy feat either. The mezzanines down below are connected to the upper level by a series of 17 escalators and 2 elevators. These escalators are some of New York City's longest, totaling 182 feet, going 150 feet down. And if you are ever curious how long it took to take the elevator versus the escalator, well, here you go. The elevators at this terminal are 3 times faster than the escalators. But unlike the elevators, the escalators are located all throughout the station. There are 4 escalators each at 48th Street, 47th Street, and 46th Street. 45th Street, on the other hand, is the only one that has 5 escalators. This is most likely due to the fact that this escalator is the closest to Grand Central proper and many exits going towards 42nd Street. But interestingly enough, the station is not perfectly level. As you make your way north through the station, there are small little inclines every couple hundred feet. So that leads me to believe that the escalator at 48th Street has to travel a little bit longer than the rest of the escalators at the station, meaning that the longest escalators in New York City are the 48th Street escalators. When trying to leave the station, there are currently a lot of exits that you can use. If you need an elevator, there are currently 4 elevators. One at 48th Street, one at 47th Street, another at 44th Street for people that need Grand Central proper, and another at 42nd Street connecting to 1 Vanderbilt, and the subway. Other exits using escalators exist at 47th Street to the JP Morgan building, the newest exit at 44th Street to the Biltmore Room in Grand Central Terminal, 43rd Street going towards the dining hall at Grand Central, and 42nd Street at 1 Vanderbilt. You can also connect between the Long Island Railroad and the Metro North in a couple locations. At 43rd Street, you can connect between the lower level tracks of Grand Central and the upper mezzanine of Grand Central Madison. At 44th Street, the exit to the Biltmore Room allows for connections with Metro North trains on the upper level. But there are also 2 easy to miss and much more useful connections. The first one is at 45th Street behind the escalator bank on the upper mezzanine. This is a secret staircase that goes under the lower level tracks at Grand Central Terminal. And at 47th Street, you'll find the main connection between Grand Central Madison and Grand Central Terminal. This connection makes for easy transfers between the 2 railroads. And if you're wondering why these connections are located in the places they are, it's because Grand Central Madison's upper mezzanine is actually located in a siding of the lower level of Grand Central. In fact, it's actually a part of the lower level loop track in Grand Central Terminal. Sometimes during the day, you can actually hear trains running above you on the upper level loop track. That's part of the reason why Highbridge Yard on the Metro North was made in the first place, to accommodate trains that were displaced due to the construction of Grand Central Madison. With the construction of this project responsible for so much reorganization of Grand Central, the big question becomes, how do you navigate around it? The planners of Grand Central Madison recognized how large the complex was and decided to implement a system of colors to identify which street you're located at. 43rd Street is represented by yellow, 44th Street is represented by red, 45th Street is represented by seafoam green, 46th Street is represented by blue, 47th Street is represented by purple, and 48th Street is represented by teal. But the use of these colors go beyond just the floor tiles at each street. It includes the tiles of the escalator banks, the columns on the platform, as well as portions portions of the state flag embedded at the top of each escalator. This can be incredibly useful for someone who doesn't speak English very well, or for someone who commonly gets lost and needs a visual point of reference. It's much easier for someone to say I'm at the blue escalators rather than I'm at the escalators by 46th Street. The terminal is also loaded with a ton of Easter eggs and other artwork. All throughout the caverns, you'll see a ton of quotes from people all throughout history. Some are as simple as a tweet, and others are iconic media, all referencing New York. Additionally, on the lower mezzanine, every node has a featured artwork, but it doesn't end there. Once you go to the upper mezzanine, there's a ton more to see. Both at 44th Street and 47th Street, there are two large mosaics covering the entire wall. And between 47th Street and 48th Street, there is a large collection of screens that can display multiple different artworks. If you wanted to know what the construction of the station looked like, behind the ticket office at 47th Street, there are a collection of photos showcasing the construction of the terminal. There is also another collection of rotating photos underneath the loop track near 43rd Street. But one of my favorite parts of the station is the digital map located behind the ticket office at 47th Street. What makes this map so special is the fact that it's not only just a map of the Long Island Railroad, it also shows the location of every train currently in service. In fact, if a train is stopped at a station, that station will light up on the map. I always appreciated the little details added to stations like this just because it adds so much character to it. Just like how Grand Central Terminal has a lot of details included in the station and beautiful artwork, having artwork down here will add to its legacy over time. And it prevents the station from feeling utilitarian and instead part of the city culture, because how people perceive the new terminal can be just as important as how useful it is to them. So now that the terminal has been open for more than a year, how does it integrate with everyone's daily life? Well, the truth is it actually varies quite a bit depending on each and every individual rider. Some have embraced it with open arms, while others have seen it as a nuisance. The truth is, not everyone can be a winner, but overall, things are getting better. So what was service like when the terminal first opened, and how did we get to where we are today? Service originally started off with a shuttle service from Jamaica departing every 30 minutes that got reduced to an hourly service during peak hours due to the fact that there were already too many trains coming from Brooklyn and Penn Station at the time. After about a month, the MTA finally implemented a full schedule with trains from all over Long Island serving Grand Central. The goal of the new schedule was to make sure that every station had at least one train an hour going to Penn Station and one train an hour going to Grand Central. Some branches like the Ronkonkoma and the West Hempstead got their service doubled. Other branches like the Port Washington branch felt like their service got halved due to the fact that they don't have the option to transfer at Jamaica. But the most furious of them all were the passengers of the Atlantic Terminal branch, as most Atlantic Terminal service is now a shuttle service from Jamaica. Most passengers who were used to having through rides to their final destination now had to get used to transferring at either Jamaica or Woodside. Additionally, due to the increase in the number of trains now traversing through Jamaica, the MTA also decided to do away with holding trains to connect with each other. This meant that more trains could reliably traverse through Jamaica. However, this came at the expense of passengers who needed to make a connection. If a passenger needed to make a connection and their train was late, now they would have to wait for the next train. This made connecting at Jamaica a little bit more tricky than it was before. However, to give credit where credit is due, the MTA overhauled train time, adding a ton of new features, helping passengers navigate through the chaos. When it comes to digital information, it does seem like the Long Island Railroad is at the top of its league. But another improvement that was also added around the same time was the introduction of the combo ticket. Since Grand Central Madison now connected the Metro North and the Long Island Railroad for the first time, it made sense to have a ticket that you could use for both railroads. The combo ticket is a ticket from your station to Grand Central plus an additional $8 to ride the other railroad anywhere you want. This new ticket makes regional trips much easier to make, and it makes it easier for people to entertain new job opportunities, new travel destinations, and trips. The ability to easily connect between the two railroads makes rail travel more competitive to car travel. However, there are some limitations, especially if you have a journey that's solely within the city. Chances are it's actually better to buy two separate city tickets, and the Train Time app will actually tell you to do that as well. And maybe that's something that they can work on in the future. But what other things should we hope and expect for? Well, believe it or not, Grand Central Madison isn't even completed yet. The station is expected to grow, and 1 year isn't really enough time to see its final form. One of the first indications that there's still a lot of work to be completed is the fact that there are temporary walls lined throughout the station. In most cases, these walls are hiding new entrances that are going to be built in the future. These new entrances will be located at 45th Street at the site of a planned building, as well as 2 additional entrances at 47th Street and 48th Street after the completion of the new Chase Tower. However, some of the exits leading towards Grand Central proper also have temporary walls attached to them. The main reasons these temporary walls exist is to prevent air circulation in the event of a smoke condition or fire, as the doors would provide separation between Grand Central Terminal and Grand Central Madison in the event of an emergency. Because this issue was discovered last minute, to allow the station to open on time, temporary walls and doors were placed. However, the MTA plans on eventually adding a more permanent solution that is much more visually appealing. Additionally, because the MTA took over the lower level loop track to build the concourse for Grand Central Madison, it's possible for them to extend that concourse over to the east side of Grand Central and make a direct connection to the subway. Right now, the only direct connection to the subway is provided by the One Vanderbilt building. Throughout the complex, you'll spot posters for vending machines that are expected to be added in the future. I have a sneaky suspicion the reason that we don't see machines there yet is due to the fact that the MTA is waiting for the full Omni rollout to add Omni machines there. It is expected that in the distant future we might be able to use Omni to pay for the Long Island Railroad and the Metro North, but as of now there hasn't been anything announced yet. And lastly, if you ever take a trip to the Biltmore Room, you might see this large poster advertising the master contract for Grand Central Madison. This contract is the bid for all the shops located within Grand Central Madison, as well as a future bar expected near the ticket office. In the future, we might be able to expect a lot of dining in shops, just like how we see in Penn Station. But something else that we can expect to see in the future thanks to projects like this is the investment of more transit projects. Grand Central Madison completed the 3 projects in New York that I grew up anticipating. The other 2 projects being the Hudson Yards extension for the 7 train and the first phase of the 2nd Avenue subway for the Q train. With all of these projects now completed, it finally paves the way for New York to start working on its next generation of projects. These projects include the IBX, 2nd Avenue Phase 2, the Gateway Tunnel project, and Penn Station access for the Metro North, the sequel to East Side Access. After nearly decades of disinvestment in transit, public opinion has now shifted and is more positive towards building new projects for the future. After completing big projects like these, people realize the need for investment and improvement, and now we're finally seeing that happen, especially considering how long these projects took to get funded after the completion of the previous generation of projects. So when I think about Grand Central Madison 1 year later, I'm glad that this station exists, and if there's anything that you think I missed or wanted to add, let me know down in the comments below. Thanks for watching.